The next month changed everything. Not with a dramatic confession, not with some shocking discovery, but with dozens of tiny choices that seemed harmless on their own. Serafina spent more time at Victor's guest house. Victor began visiting the main estate more frequently. Family dinners became less common. Conversations became shorter. Excuses became easier. And little by little, the distance between Adrian and his wife grew. The frightening part wasn't how quickly it happened. It was how naturally it happened. One evening, Adrian found himself sitting alone at the dining table. The food had already gone cold. Lyra sat across from him, quietly eating. The seat beside Adrian remained empty, just like it had been for the past week. Finally, Lyra spoke. "Mother isn't coming again, is she?" Adrian looked up.
No.
Lyra nodded. She didn't seem surprised anymore. That worried him. Children usually adapt to painful situations faster than adults. But adaptation often came at a cost. Sometimes it meant accepting things that should never be accepted. "Do you miss her?" Adrian asked. Lyra hesitated, then nodded. A little. Not a lot. Not terribly. Just a little." That answer hurt more than he expected, because it revealed something obvious. Serafina wasn't only abandoning her husband. She was slowly abandoning her daughter too. Later that night, Adrian received another report from the investigators he had secretly hired. The information made his blood run cold. Victor's condition had not only stabilized, it had improved. Significantly, the treatments from the capital were working. There was no imminent death. No final year.
No desperate countdown.
Nothing. The foundation of Victor's entire story was collapsing. Adrian spent hours reviewing every document, every physician's statement, every medical record. The conclusion remained the same. Victor wasn't dying. At least not anytime soon. Yet he continued acting like a man counting down his final days. Why? The question haunted Adrian. Until another report arrived. This one contained something even worse. A witness statement. According to a servant working near the guest house, Victor and Serafina had been seen embracing. Late at night. Alone. For several minutes. Adrian closed his eyes. The novel had reached the point of no return. Even knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. For nearly an hour he sat motionless in his study. Then he folded the report, locked it away, and said nothing. Because he needed certainty. Not assumptions. Not suspicions. Certainty. A week later, certainty arrived. Adrian had returned unexpectedly from a trade meeting. Rain poured from dark clouds. The estate seemed unusually quiet. As he entered the mansion, he noticed something strange. Several servants looked nervous, avoiding eye contact, whispering among themselves. Immediately his instincts activated. He headed toward the western wing, toward the corridor leading to Victor's private quarters. Halfway there he heard voices. A man, a woman, then silence. Adrian approached the partially open door and looked inside. Time seemed to stop. Victor stood beside a window. Serafina stood in his arms. They weren't talking. They weren't arguing. They were kissing. For several seconds Adrian simply stared. Not because he couldn't believe it, because he could. He had expected this moment for months. Yet reality always carried more weight than imagination. Eventually Victor opened his eyes. Their gazes met. Shock exploded across Victor's face. Serafina turned. The color drained from her skin. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Rain hammered against the windows. Finally Adrian stepped backward. Then another step. Then another. Without saying a single word. Without shouting. Without threatening. Without demanding explanations. He simply turned around and walked away. Behind him he heard Serafina calling his name. He didn't stop. He didn't even look back. That silence terrified them far more than anger ever could. The following days transformed the estate into a graveyard. Adrian spoke only when necessary. Meals happened in silence. Hallways felt cold. Every room seemed haunted. Serafina tried repeatedly to talk. Adrian refused. Victor requested meetings. Adrian declined. Nothing changed. Then came the confession. It happened nearly 3 weeks later. The original novel had unfolded similarly, but this version was somehow worse, because Adrian already knew what was coming. The knock arrived shortly after midnight. Adrian opened the study door. Serafina stood outside. Tears filled her eyes. Immediately he understood. The time had come. "Can we talk?" He stepped aside. She entered, closed the door. For several moments she simply stood there, struggling to speak. Finally the words emerged.
I'm pregnant.
Silence. Heavy silence. Then Adrian slowly sat down. His expression never changed. How far? Almost 4 months. Exactly as he remembered. Almost exactly. Serafina began crying. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Adrian said nothing. He was scared. Still silence. He thought he was dying. Nothing. She looked desperate, broken, terrified. Then she finally said the words Adrian remembered from the novel. He wanted something to remain after he was gone. A bitter smile appeared on Adrian's face. There it was. The justification. The excuse. The story they had created to live with themselves. Serafina took a step forward. "Please understand." "Understand what?" Her voice trembled. "We didn't plan this." Adrian laughed. The sound startled even him. There was no humor in it. Only exhaustion. "You didn't plan the first meeting?"
No.
"The second?"
No.
"The third?"
No.
"The secret conversations? The midnight visits? The lies? The affair?" Each question struck like a hammer. Serafina cried harder. Adrian stood. For the first time, genuine anger appeared on his face. "You planned every step. Adrian, you just never planned the consequences." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. But Adrian wasn't finished. Because unlike the original story, he possessed information she didn't. Information capable of destroying every justification she had built. "He isn't dying." The room froze. Serafina stared. "What?" "He isn't dying." Fear entered her eyes. Adrian pulled several documents from his desk, then tossed them onto the table. Medical reports, physician statements, treatment records, evidence. Lots of evidence. Serafina read them, and her face slowly turned white.
No.
"Yes.
No.
Yes." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "He told me. He lied." The words hit her harder than any slap, because Adrian could see realization spreading across her face. The foundation beneath her feet was cracking. Every decision she had justified through pity, every boundary she had crossed, every sacrifice she had made. Suddenly none of it looked noble anymore. It looked selfish, impulsive, foolish. "I loved him," she whispered. The confession escaped before she could stop it. Silence followed. Then Adrian nodded. Finally, the truth. Not duty, not sympathy, not compassion. Love. Simple, brutal, honest, and devastating. Adrian looked at the woman he had once loved. The woman he had spent 20 years building a life with. And for the first time since his reincarnation, he felt something die inside him. Not his marriage. That had already died. Not his trust. That had died months ago. Something deeper. Something harder to replace. Hope. The next morning Adrian made his decision. In the original novel, he reacted with uncontrolled rage. This time he chose something colder. Something more dangerous. Preparation. He summoned lawyers, accountants, investigators, political allies. By sunset, the process had already begun. Divorce papers were drafted. Property records were secured. Witness statements were collected. Evidence was organized. Every possible move was calculated. For weeks he worked quietly, relentlessly. Meanwhile, panic spread through both Serafina and Victor, because they could feel something approaching, like distant thunder before a storm. Then Victor made a mistake. A fatal mistake. Desperate to save the situation, he attempted to meet Adrian privately. The meeting occurred inside the estate's library. Only the two men were present. Victor looked exhausted, guilty, ashamed. But Adrian no longer cared. "I never wanted this." Victor's first words. Adrian almost laughed. "Nobody ever wants consequences." Victor flinched. "I cared about her. I know. I love her. I know." Every response landed like ice. Victor swallowed hard. "I know I betrayed you." Adrian stared at him for several seconds. Then he asked one question. A simple question. The question that destroyed Victor completely. "When exactly were you planning to tell me you weren't dying?" Victor's face lost all color. And in that moment, Adrian got his answer. Not through words, not through explanations, but through silence. Victor had never intended to tell him. Not before the affair. Not before the pregnancy. Not before the lies. Never. And suddenly Adrian realized something terrifying. This wasn't a tragedy created by fate. This wasn't destiny. This wasn't some unavoidable story. It was a series of conscious choices, made by people who valued their desires more than the lives they were destroying. Victor opened his mouth, trying to explain, trying to apologize, trying to justify. Adrian stood and walked past him. The conversation was over, because the next chapter of this story would not be about betrayal. It would be about consequences. And neither Victor nor Serafina were prepared for what was coming. The storm arrived faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, divorce proceedings began. The noble families of the Northern Territories learned the truth. Servants whispered. Merchants gossiped. Political allies distanced themselves. Everywhere people discussed the same scandal. Lady Serafina Ravensheyer had carried another man's child while still married. In a world where reputation could determine an entire family's future, the damage was catastrophic. Yet Adrian never publicly insulted her, never screamed, never threw accusations into the streets. Instead, he simply released the facts. The truth did the rest. That frightened people more than rage ever could. Because anger eventually burns out. Cold certainty does not. One evening, both families gathered inside the Ravensheyer estate. Grandparents, uncles, aunts, relatives from both sides. The atmosphere felt suffocating. Nobody wanted to be there, but everyone knew this conversation had to happen. Serafina sat with swollen eyes. Victor sat nearby, looking like a man awaiting execution. Adrian entered last, his expression unreadable. The room fell silent. For several moments nobody spoke. Then Serafina's father finally broke the silence. "Tell me this isn't true." His voice shook, not with anger, with disappointment. Serafina lowered her head. That was answer enough. The old man's shoulders slumped, as if 10 years had suddenly been added to his life. "You destroyed everything." Tears rolled down Serafina's face. But no one came to comfort her. Not this time. Then another voice spoke. "Lyra, Adrian's daughter. Can we stop this?" Everyone looked toward her. She stood trembling, barely holding herself together. "Please." Her eyes moved between her parents. "There has to be another way." The room remained silent. Then Adrian asked a question. One simple question. "How long have you known?" Lyra froze. Immediately, Adrian saw the answer, and so did everyone else. Tears filled her eyes. "Father!" "How long?" She began crying. 3 months. The word struck harder than any blade. 3 months. She had known for 3 months. Adrian closed his eyes. Not because he was angry, because he was tired. So unbelievably tired. The betrayal he expected. The affair he expected. Even the pregnancy he expected. But somehow this hurt more. His daughter had known. His daughter had watched everything happen. And she had chosen silence. "I was scared," she whispered. Adrian nodded slowly. "I know. Please don't hate me." The room became painfully quiet. Then Adrian spoke words that would haunt him for years. "I don't know what I feel anymore." Lyra broke down completely. For the first time since his reincarnation, Adrian nearly abandoned everything. Nearly gave in. Nearly chose forgiveness. But then he remembered the lies, the manipulation, the months of deception, and something inside him hardened again. The divorce continued. Weeks became months. Lawyers battled. Assets were divided. Testimonies were given. The final blow arrived when investigators proved Victor had concealed the truth about his medical condition. That revelation destroyed what little public sympathy remained. Suddenly the affair looked even worse. Not a tragic romance born from impending death. Just two people making selfish choices. By winter, the marriage officially ended. 21 years together. Reduced to signatures on paper. When Adrian returned home after the final hearing, the mansion felt empty. Not peaceful. Empty. There was a difference. One evening, he found himself standing inside Lyra's old room. She had moved out shortly after the divorce. Their relationship had never recovered. They still exchanged letters occasionally. But the warmth was gone. A wall now existed between them, and both knew it. Months later, news arrived from the capital. Victor's condition had suddenly worsened. This time for real. The disease that had remained stable for years became aggressive. The healers were helpless. Ironically, the death sentence he once pretended to have had finally become reality. Adrian felt nothing when he heard the news. Or at least he thought he felt nothing. Then another letter arrived. Serafina had gone into labor early. Complications had developed. Both mother and child were in danger. For several minutes Adrian simply stared at the letter, then set it aside. He did not visit. He did not write back. He did nothing. 3 days later another message arrived. Victor was dead. The disease had finally taken him. According to witnesses, his final hours had been miserable. Not because of pain, because of regret. Apparently he spent his last night asking for Serafina, but she had been unconscious during childbirth. The two never saw each other again. Adrian folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, then continued his day. A week later another messenger arrived, this time bringing worse news. The child had been born alive.
Asson.
But he carried a severe congenital heart defect. The healers tried everything. Ancient magic, rare medicines, experimental treatments. Nothing worked. 5 days later the baby died. Adrian read the report in silence. A child. Gone before he even had a chance to live. The story should have ended there. But tragedy wasn't finished. 7 days after losing her son, Serafina died. The official cause was magical cardiac failure. The healers described it as a condition caused by overwhelming emotional trauma. In simple terms, her heart gave up. When Adrian received the news, he sat alone for a very long time. Hours passed. Night arrived. Still he sat there, not crying, not speaking, simply existing. Eventually he walked to a mirror, and barely recognized the man staring back. His hair contained more gray than before. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His face looked older, not physically, spiritually. The revenge he once thought would bring satisfaction had accomplished nothing. Victor was dead. Serafina was dead. The child was dead. His daughter was gone. And he was alone, completely alone. The realization struck harder than any betrayal ever had. Because for the first time Adrian understood something. Winning and losing were not opposites. Sometimes they happened simultaneously. The following months became a blur. The estate deteriorated. Adrian stopped attending social functions, stopped meeting friends, stopped caring about politics. Days melted into weeks, weeks into months. One rainy evening he sat alone in his study. A bottle rested on the desk. Half empty, or half full. He no longer cared which. Thunder echoed outside. The mansion felt like a tomb. Slowly Adrian opened a drawer. Inside rested a revolver, a relic from an ancient magical war. He stared at it for several minutes, then picked it up. The metal felt cold, heavy, simple. One movement, one pull, and everything would finally be quiet. No more memories, no more regret, no more pain. He raised the weapon. Then a knock interrupted him. Adrian froze. Another knock. Annoyed, he lowered the revolver. Who would visit at this hour? The knock came again. Eventually he opened the front door. A man stood outside, rain dripping from his coat. Marcus Valli, the attorney who had represented him during the divorce. Unlike most people, Marcus never abandoned him afterward. "You look terrible," Marcus said. Adrian almost smiled. "Thank you." Marcus glanced at him carefully, then stepped inside. His eyes briefly landed on the revolver visible through the open study door. The attorney understood immediately. Neither man mentioned it. Instead, Marcus said something unexpected. "Come with me." "Where?" "You'll see." Under normal circumstances, Adrian would have refused. But something in Marcus's voice stopped him. 2 hours later, they arrived at a small countryside home. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive, just a modest house surrounded by trees. Marcus opened the door. Inside sat a boy around 10 years old. Thin, silent, expressionless. The child didn't even look up. "Who is he?" Adrian asked. Marcus sighed. "My nephew." The boy remained motionless. "He lost his parents 2 years ago." Still no reaction. "He hates the world." Now the boy looked up. The hatred in his eyes startled Adrian, because he recognized it instantly. He had seen it every morning in the mirror. Marcus placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "This is Rowan." Then he looked toward Adrian. "And this stubborn old fool is Adrian." The boy said nothing. Adrian said nothing. For several seconds they simply stared at each other. Two broken people, separated by age, united by pain. Then something strange happened. Rowan frowned, not angrily, curiously, almost as if he had found someone who finally understood. And for the first time in years, Adrian smiled. Not a fake smile, not a bitter smile, a real one, small, fragile, but real, because he finally understood why fate had brought him into this novel world. Not to stop a betrayal, not to seek revenge, not to rewrite destiny, but to learn something he had failed to understand in both lives. Hatred feels powerful, he feels righteous, feels deserved, but eventually it consumes everything around it. And when the fire finally dies, all that's left is ash. The road ahead would be long. Healing always was. Neither Adrian nor Rowan would recover overnight. There would be setbacks, arguments, painful memories, years of work. But for the first time since his reincarnation, Adrian saw a future. Not a perfect future, just a future. And sometimes that was enough. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The storm that had destroyed so many lives had passed. And in the quiet that followed, a new story finally began. The end. If the story made you feel something, leave a like. Not every story is meant to comfort you. Some are meant to follow you. And if this one stays with you, subscribe, because the next one goes even deeper.